discover the surprising truths behind an amazing visit to a 2,000-year-old Pompeii brothel. Jane stood in the cavernous halls of the museum, a world of history surrounding her. But all she could feel was the pinching weight of doubt. Cataloging artifacts was supposed to ignite her passion for archaeology. Yet all it did was deepen her internal chasm. Whispers of skepticism from her mother echoed in her ears. "Why can't you just focus on a stable job like everyone else?" The phrase ricocheted in her mind, turning her stomach. She was a single mother, yes, but was that a reason to bury her dreams? As she painstakingly organized the items, she noticed something extraordinary: a beautifully engraved tablet, glimmering beneath layers of dust, hinting at centuries of buried stories. Her heart raced. Here was a chance to prove herself, to chase down the narratives women like her had been denied. Questions swirled as she held the tablet. What would her family say if they knew she wanted to pursue the artifact's origins? Would they continue to dismiss her aspirations as mere women's work? Each glance at her children, playing nearby, pulled her in two directions: devotion to them and her deep yearning for acceptance in the academic world. The tablet became a symbol of everything she longed for: a voice in history, validation, and the confidence to challenge the status quo. What if, she thought, feeling the mantra of encouragement struggle against her ankle-deep self-doubt, if she could piece together these narratives and challenge the narrative surrounding women's representation, perhaps she could forge her own legacy amidst the cacophony of disbelief. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The thought of unveiling the truths behind that tablet pushed her to dig deeper, leading her to an opportunity to visit the ruins of Pompeii. Excitement and fear intertwined as she booked the flight, feeling exhilarated yet burdened by her family's disapproval. As she walked through those crumbling walls, she felt the air heavy with regrets of the past, and an inexplicable kinship began to unfurl within her. She stumbled upon a series of artifacts from an ancient brothel, a harsh reality that resonated through time. These women, too, lived unseen lives, dragged into roles dictated by others, their strength hidden beneath centuries of neglect. Jane felt their stories all around her, as if they beckoned her to listen, to honor them with her voice. But the time in Pompeii also tugged at Jane's own familial roots. She imagined generations of women in her family grappling with thorns of their own pain, resistance, resilience. Having faced her own struggles, the parallels melted away the distance between her and those women, yet brought forth a tidal wave of anguish. What if she failed them? What if her aspirations crumbled before her as they had for so many others? These thoughts churned inside her head like a storm, forcing her to confront a bitter truth: that the traces of history had now become her tether to a dream she desperately wanted to pursue. As she returned home, her happiness was laced with tension. With an invitation to speak at a prestigious conference weighing heavily on her heart, she oscillated between exhilaration and devastation. The faces of experienced academics loomed large in her mind, mixed with a desperate need to prove her worth, to tear down the walls of disbelief that had shadowed her for so long. Her children needed her, but could she abandon this chance to make a mark for them? Standing backstage, she felt everything surge within her. Breathing irregularly, she prepared to step into the limelight, surveying the audience. Doubt curled around her like fog, her past failures muddling in with this critical moment. Just as she was about to step forward, she spotted a familiar figure, her former mentor, that dismissive voice echoing in her thoughts, a threat to her credibility. Jane teetered on the edge of courage and fear, completely aware that her dreams hung in the balance. What awaited her on that stage would either redefine her existence or shatter her resolve altogether, and she felt the stirrings of her own history paving the way for a confrontation that could amplify not just her narrative, but those of countless women lost in the whispers of time. The tremors of hesitation rocked Jane as she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights casting shadows that masked her doubts. Her heart thundered in her chest, each beat echoing the magnitude of this moment. This was not just a presentation. It was a chance to reclaim her narrative, a podium from which she could elevate the voices of women so frequently relegated to the periphery. She glanced at the expectant faces in the crowd. Scholars with piercing gazes, students clinging to every word, skeptics lurking in the corners. Each individual represented both a potential ally and a source of judgment. The room felt stifling, her breath trapped in a web of anxiety. But the engraved tablet from Pompeii flickered in her mind, its history, its stories all urging her onward. As she initiated her talk, her voice quivered, revealing an unfamiliar blend of vulnerability and strength. She began by recounting her journey, the significance of the tablet, and the stories of the women whose identities had been obscured by centuries of indifference. The audience listened intently, and Jane realized that she was not just speaking to them. She was gaining momentum in her own self-discovery. The deeper she delved into her narrative, the more she unearthed the intertwined histories of displacement and resilience. She shared the human cost of historical misrepresentation, detailing how every artifact told a tale of struggle and survival. Phrases began to spill from her lips with renewed vigor, revealing hidden competencies she had yet to acknowledge even to herself. As she portrayed the fierce spirits of those women from Pompeii, she drew strength from their collective memory, igniting her own. But as her confidence grew, so did the relentless specter of her mentor's judgment. A fleeting glance toward him became a dagger of dread piercing through her newfound assertiveness. She could almost hear his derisive whispers questioning her presence, mocking her determination. Summoning all her energy, she shifted her focus back to the audience, grounding herself in the purpose of her presentation. She was not there to seek validation from the past. She was there to forge a new path forward. With each sentence, Jane's determination solidified. She presented not simply facts about the artifacts, but the emotional resonance they carried, the lives they echoed. The shift in her tone was palpable, and for the first time, the crowd seemed less like an adversarial panel and more like a community yearning for connection. Their nods, murmurs of agreement, and focused stares amplified the fire burning within her. She began to feel buoyed by their collective energy, turning her fear into a powerful conduit of expression. Yet, just as she reached the climax of her address, Jane caught the corner of her mentor's lips curl into a smirk. It sent a jolt of doubt through her. Was she truly being heard, or was it merely a masquerade of acceptance cloaked in critique? In that heartbeat of uncertainty, she pondered, what would happen if I faltered? Would all of this unravel? Am I even worthy of this stage? Suddenly, the weight of her aspirations seemed to hang in precarious balance, like a tightrope walk above a canyon of despair. Fighting the impulse to retreat into doubt, she remembered her children, the reasons for pursuing her passion, and the stories that needed to be told. She gasped, readying herself for the grand finale. This was not just a presentation. This was her awakening. Being a woman in history, Jane concluded, means reclaiming our stories, engaging with the narratives that have been hidden away for far too long. I stand here today not just for myself, but for all those who felt unseen, unheard, and unvalued. We must lift their voices together. The audience erupted in applause, a sound that washed over her like a tide of acceptance. Yet, as she stepped down from the stage, exhilaration battled with trepidation. Had she truly made an impact, or had she merely skimmed the surface of a deep-seated truth? As she exited the venue, Jane felt her phone buzzing, unexpected text flashing across her screen. It was an invitation to collaborate on a project documenting the lives of women in history. Her heart raced, uncertainty tangled with hope as she contemplated the implications. Would this opportunity extend her grasp into the academic arena or pull her deeper into the weight of expectations? The answer seemed just out of reach, suspended between her desires and realities. Standing at this new crossroads, Jane grasped the magnitude of her next decision. What would it require of her? And was she really ready to confront what lay ahead? As echoes of her speech surrounded her, she felt the question resonate within. What if this was only the beginning of unearthing not just history, but herself? Jane stood in the dimly lit hallway, the buzz of applause still ringing in her ears, overshadowed by the weight of her phone in her hand. The invitation glowed, promising an opportunity to explore the lives of women woven into the fabric of history. Yet, anxiety clamored for space in her mind, loud and insistent. Was she ready for this? Could she navigate the complexities and expectations it would entail? The empty echo of the auditorium faded behind her as thoughts surged like waves. It had been a long time since she had stood confidently at the forefront of academia. After years of feeling overshadowed, this was a chance to assert her identity not just as a scholar, but as a woman with a voice worth listening to. However, the shadows of doubt lingered, primarily in the form of her mentor's mocking expression, still etched vividly in her mind. Would he see this new endeavor as another failure? Would he dismiss her contributions? She took a deep breath, remembering how she had stood before an audience, pouring her heart into a discourse that felt raw yet essential. That moment had unveiled something within her that was often hidden, an urgent desire to champion the narratives of silenced women. This project could amplify that voice, yet the lurking fears demanded acknowledgement. She was battling not only external perceptions but the internal narrative that questioned her worthiness. Jane returned to her office, the usual chaos of papers and books scattered across her desk a comfort in its familiarity. As she sank into her chair, she started to sift through historical texts, allowing her surroundings to absorb the tension gripping her. She pored over the stories of women in ancient Pompeii, their lives etched in the cracks of time, searching for connections that could fortify her own voice. With every artifact, she felt a shared history unfolding, each one igniting a flicker of purpose within her. What would it take to reconnect those past lives with current struggles? What kind of narrative could she bring to life that hadn't yet been told? Each question felt like a pebble thrown into a still pond, rippling outward, forcing her to confront not only the historical truths, but her own experiences as a woman who had often felt relegated to the sidelines. The implications of the collaborative project loomed heavily like a gathering storm. She could sense both the promise of fulfilling her passion and the fear of stepping into unknown territory where she might be met with skepticism. How could she navigate her mentor's looming presence, who often thrived on competition and criticism? Confrontation seemed inevitable. Taking up a pen, Jane began to outline her ideas, transforming her anxieties into actionable steps. The act of writing made her feel anchored, grounding her thoughts. The notion of intertwining ancient stories with contemporary voices posed a challenge, but it was one she had to embrace. What if I succeed? She whispered under her breath, an incantation against her fears, and with that, determination began to take root. Suddenly, the faint crack of a door creaked open, breaking her focus. She looked up to find her mentor standing in the doorway, a judgmental glare piercing through her newfound resolve. The storm of uncertainty swirled back into her chest. Had he overheard her murmur of ambition? Would he dismiss her aspirations as foolish? The moment suspended, the air thick with unspoken words. Jane knew this was a defining moment, a chance to stand up for her beliefs, to signal she would not back down easily. The confrontation she had dreaded for so long had arrived, uninvited yet inevitable. With a deep breath, she picked up her notebook, purpose swirling within her as she prepared to assert herself. The direction of her journey lay before her, tension hanging in the balance. What would come after this confrontation, and how would it shape the woman she was becoming? Determined, she stood, ready to face him, the potential for both conflict and clarity igniting within her. Would this challenge solidify her path, or had she underestimated the power of her mentor's influence? The answer lay just beyond the threshold of confrontation. Jane's heart raced as her mentor stepped into the office, the shadows from the hallway cloaking his face. His presence felt like an adversarial wind, chilling her resolve just as she had begun to gather it. The articulate facade she had worked so hard to maintain wavered. For a moment, she was tempted to retreat, but the stakes were too high if she were to avoid returning to the silence that had long defined her academic existence. Jane, he began, his voice a mix of skepticism and obligation. I saw your presentation, and frankly, I wondered about your approach to this project. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Are you sure you want to go down this road? There it was, the faint provocation disguised as concern. It stung. She could feel her chest constrict with the familiar weight of doubt. Did he truly believe she would falter? Or was this merely another attempt to undermine her confidence? I believe it's important to highlight unheard stories, Jane replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Women from history deserve a voice, and I intend to give that to them through my research. He raised an eyebrow, his skepticism palpable. You're aiming high for someone who has danced around the edges of serious scholarship for so long. What makes you think this is your moment to shine? His words dripped with disdain, yet anger ignited something within her. Every word she had mulled over, every silent vow to champion women's narratives, crowded her mind. This confrontation was not merely about the project. It was about reclaiming her narrative, her space in academia, and her identity. Maybe I'm ready to step beyond the edges now, she stated, her voice rising with a newfound conviction. I've spent years listening to other voices. This time, I intend to honor the stories of women who've been silenced by history, just as I felt silenced. The silence that followed was electric, a moment suspended in time where she dared to meet his gaze. She could see a flicker of surprise pass over his features, but it quickly shifted back to skepticism. Yet she could feel that she had cracked the shell of his dismissiveness, even if just briefly. Chasing shadows, Jane? That's all this is, he retorted, arms falling to his sides, revealing his slight irritation blended with intrigue. But Jane sensed the challenge inflected with the unspoken question, had she underestimated her own abilities? Perhaps. She nodded, but if I don't give it a chance, how will I ever know what I can accomplish? Women's voices in history have always been dismissed. Isn't it time we changed that narrative? His jaw tightened, and she noted the quickening of his breath, a slight shift in the air. Was that uncertainty she detected, or mere annoyance at her defiance? I hope for your sake that you've chosen a path which truly reflects your capabilities, Jane, he finally said, his tone softened by a hint of grudging respect. You'll need to defend your ideas rigorously. Then I'll prepare to defend them, Jane replied, her heart hammering triumphantly against her ribcage. Each word felt like a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. Even if doubts still whispered at the edges of her consciousness, she had claimed this moment. As her mentor left the room, a renewed sense of purpose surged through her. She had not only defended her aspirations but had confronted her long-held fear of inadequacy. This was only the beginning. Taking a deep breath, she returned to her desk, and as she wrote, her mind whirled with ideas and connections. She envisioned a presentation that interlaced ancient women's struggles with modern realities, a narrative interwoven to resonate deeply within a contemporary audience. What insights might the lives of these ancient women provide? Could they empower her to break through the professional glass ceiling that loomed over her? The implications were intoxicating. But with ambition set in motion, Jane recognized the necessity to fortify her defenses. She was no longer just a participant in academic discourse. She was manifesting her project into existence. As she passed over the pages with fresh pen strokes, a deeper revelation flickered. She had always harbored resilience she hadn't fully acknowledged. What else might she uncover within herself? Each page turned into an invitation, each word a promise. Strength awaited in the narrative she was crafting. Yet amid this empowerment loomed another challenge, a tightening deadline and looming skepticism from a broader audience beyond her mentor. What would it take to surmount those expectations, to expand this project from her singular vision into a collective roar? The next steps were crucial, and she was ready to devise a strategy for not only acceptance but for dominance. But would the shadows of her mentor's doubts linger long enough to cloud her path? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in her dimly lit office, Jane's mind swirled with plans and propositions. She felt invigorated yet apprehensive, the tension of her recent confrontation propelling her forward. It was one thing to defend her project against her mentor. It was another entirely to present it to a room full of skeptical peers. With every flick of her pen, she imagined her audience's faces. Doubtful, condescending, and perhaps a few curious minds eager for revelation. The thought almost sent her heart racing in trepidation. She set aside her notes, forcing herself to confront a looming reality: she needed allies. Emails flew off into cyberspace, each a tiny plea for collaboration. She reached out to her classmates, seeking connections with those who shared a passion for women's narratives. Jane envisioned a multidisciplinary approach, combining historical context with modern implications. In reaching out, however, she wrestled with self-doubt. Would they see value in her ideas? Would they dismiss her as her mentor had done? As the night wore on, she fought against the whispers of insecurity that insisted she was unworthy of their time or respect. But too much was at stake now. Her vision transcended her. It was a call for unity and understanding, for reconsidering established narratives steeped in bias. This realization ignited a vigor within her, and she pressed forward, crafting emails that resonated with authenticity. Weeks passed and responses trickled in. A few classmates were eager to engage, intrigued by the prospect of uncovering hidden stories from the annals of history. The conversations sparked fresh ideas. One peer suggested integrating multimedia components into her presentation, while another proposed drawing parallels between historical female figures and contemporary activists. Jane felt exhilarated. Collaboration infused her with energy she hadn't anticipated. Yet, the looming deadline still haunted her. As she moved closer to her presentation date, Jane faced her greatest challenge: the impending critique from those who might still cling to the status quo. What if they questioned her credibility? The memories of her mentor's skepticism echoed in her mind, snipping away at her confidence. She needed to transform that energy, to harness it as fuel instead of letting it be a shackle. Determined, she organized study sessions. Each meeting became a crucible for her ideas. The discussions held the tension of debate, yet she welcomed it. During one session, a classmate posed a question that shook her. What will you say to convince them that these stories matter? The question lingered like a challenge. Jane spent sleepless nights considering not just the facts but the emotional resonance of those narratives. What made these stories vital beyond mere academia? As she grappled with this essential question, she began refining her presentation, focusing on the heart of her research rather than expected methodologies. Hours turned to days of intense preparation. Each one felt like a climb toward an unseen summit. Anticipating the challenge ahead, she repeatedly rehearsed, practicing her delivery until her confidence began to solidify like granite. Then it hit her: this wasn't just about her project. It was about a broader aim to alter the landscape of academic dialogue forever. She visualized stepping onto that stage, defying every expectation set upon her by her mentor and society. But still, she felt a tightening in her chest. Was she truly prepared to face that audience? With just days left until presentation day, Jane came to a stark realization. She could either cower beneath unyielding expectations or confront them head-on, shaping her narrative as she so longed to shape those of women in history. Would she have the courage to own that stage when the time came? What storms awaited her as the day drew near? The morning of the presentation dawned with an unsettling mix of excitement and dread. Sunlight pierced through the blinds of Jane's office, illuminating the scattered papers and sticky notes that had become her lifeline. She had worked tirelessly, dissecting every detail of her research, but the anxiety of public speaking lingered like an uninvited guest. Bright colors of the world outside contrasted sharply against the monochromatic fear in her heart. As Jane dressed, her hands trembled slightly. Each article of clothing was a piece of armor. A black blazer signified professionalism, while the soft fabric of her blouse represented a gentler, more approachable persona. She practiced her opening line in front of the mirror, searching for an anchor in her self-doubt. "These stories matter," she murmured, trying to infuse conviction into the statement that had both ignited her passion and haunted her thoughts. Empowered by the nights spent honing her narrative, she made her way to the university, each step growing heavier with the weight of anticipation. The air was thick with speculation. Her classmates, gathered in clusters, provided their own atmospheres of tension. Some were hopeful, and others were cautious. When Jane entered the auditorium, a wave of apprehension washed over her. The rows of seats faded into a blur of expectant faces. Before the presentation, Jane's classmates encouraged her, but they also nudged her fears to the surface. A nervous energy hummed in the air as she settled onto the stage, the lights dimming and adjusting to spotlight her. Suddenly, she felt raw and exposed, under scrutiny from both allies and skeptics alike. In that moment, a pivotal thought pierced through the cacophony of anxiety. This was her story to tell. Her fingers clutched the podium, grounding her. The visual backdrop filled with captivating images of women from history flashed before her, their triumphs and their silences woven into a single narrative tapestry. She took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of her preparation and belief into that first second of courage. As she introduced her project, Jane spotted her mentor in the audience. His expression was inscrutable, an impenetrable barrier against her aspirations. The realization hit her like a gale. His judgment was meaningful only if she allowed it to be. The clicks of her slides synchronized with her voice. She spoke about the stories, the significance they held, and their relevance today. With every passing sentence, she felt herself transforming, embodying the essence of those women whose narratives had long been muted. Audience reactions began to shift. Faces that were once skeptical softened, and a palpable interest emerged. But as questions began to arise from the audience, the lingering doubt pitched its comeback. One peer challenging her premise sent a shiver down her spine, igniting the defensive instinct within her. "Why should we care about these historical figures?" he asked. Instead of deflecting, Jane reframed her response, drawing upon the emotional resonance of the stories as she had prepared. Through articulate counterpoints grounded in evidence, vitality infused her words, morphing frustration into passion. The auditorium wavered. She did not just speak of women as history but related it to current inequalities, connecting paths across timelines. As the critique faded and applause replaced uncertainty, Jane registered a remarkable shift within. She had confronted her fears, not merely surviving but flourishing in the face of skepticism. The exhilaration of reclaiming her narrative lingered. Leaving the stage, she found herself in a moment of reflection. Had she truly altered her audience's viewpoint? Had she, for a fleeting moment, altered her own? Outside the auditorium, Jane caught sight of her mentor approaching. The familiar challenge flickered in his eyes, a smirk playing on his lips as she braced herself for the inevitable confrontation. But with renewed resolve, she declared internally, today, she stood not just as a student but a voice yearning to be heard whether he liked it or not. As they drew near, his opening words hung in the air like a pendulum, the weight of judgment poised to swing either way. What would he say? Would it shatter her newfound confidence or embrace it? Jane's heart raced as her mentor's lips curled into an almost mocking smile. It was a familiar expression that brought forth memories of his relentless critiques in the past, a constant reminder of the high standards he set. But today, Jane felt anchored in a way she hadn't before. "Interesting presentation," he remarked, his voice smooth yet edged with condescension. "You made some daring connections, but it might be wise to revisit your sources. I still question your grasp of the subject." There it was, the typical dismissal wrapped in ambiguity. Instead of allowing his words to chip away at her confidence, Jane took a deep breath. She was not his student today. She was a researcher contributing to a vital discussion, and his opinion would not define her. "Thank you for your feedback," she replied evenly, the weight of every word holding newfound authority. "I believe the energy of these stories can resonate in today's context more than we realize. Ignoring them would do a disservice to both the past and present." The words flowed with the ease of conviction, reflecting the hours she had poured into her study and the passion ignited on stage. Her mentor looked momentarily taken aback, his habitual confidence faltering. Did he expect her to back down? Yet, before she could regain composure, his demeanor shifted. The smirk vanished, replaced by a focused curiosity. Perhaps, he said, but you're walking a thin line. In academia, bold claims require rigorous evidence. Every inch of her wanted to retreat, to dismiss his challenge as condescending nonsense. But instead, Jane leaned into the discomfort. What if the evidence exists outside traditional narratives? What if our emphasis on conventional metrics prevents us from viewing essential truths? The intellectual volley felt electric, sparking something unnameable within her. Would she win this verbal sparring match? That was irrelevant. What mattered was her persistence and her pursuit of truth. As they spoke, a few peers lingered nearby, pretending to be engrossed in conversations while secretly listening intently. They were witnesses to her confrontation, straining to remain calm under their scrutiny added tension. But Jane would not shy away from this moment that was curating her identity as both scholar and storyteller. "You've gained confidence," her mentor finally said, his voice still skeptical but underscored with a hint of respect. "Let us see if you can maintain it in your future research." With that, he turned away, leaving Jane standing on the edge of something dynamic and new, but the spark of uncertainty still flickered inside her. In reflecting on the exchange, Jane realized something significant. There was power in asserting her voice, especially in the presence of opposition. From that moment on, she envisioned her next projects not just as academic exercises, but as platforms to convey history's nuanced truths. Engaging audiences with authentic narratives mattered more than ever. Feeling invigorated, she departed the venue, but the energy from the stage remained with her, a catalyst for future exploration. Over the past few weeks, she had delved deep into women's history, exploring layers of pain, triumph, and resilience. What if she could create a performance piece combining these narratives with her own? Suddenly, an idea struck hard. What if she collaborated with performers to turn her research into an immersive presentation? This wasn't just about reciting historical facts but a full-bodied engagement of the senses, enabling the audience to feel as if they were part of the stories. As she walked, the vision expanded in her mind. Could spark dialogues about issues that mattered today, transcending the borders of academia. Her heart raced with potential and excitement. Yet, as Jane's thoughts spiraled into endless possibilities, a specter of doubt whispered in her ear. Was she ready to take this leap into uncharted artistic territory? And what would her mentor say if she embraced this radical shift? The transformative journey lay before her, filled with both thrilling prospects and terrifying uncertainties. Jane began to consider her next steps, and deep down, she recognized their profound significance. It was time to explore her boundaries, even if it meant facing criticism. But soon, she would confront a greater challenge. Could she entrust her ideas to others and collaborate without losing her vision? As the vibrant streetlights flickered above her, illuminating her path, Jane understood that the real test of her growth was not just in taking bold steps, but in confronting the doubts that followed closely. Would she pull back from vulnerability, or would she dare to leap into a new, intertwined journey? The next chapter of her life awaited. Jane devoured every moment of the quiet evening air as she returned home. Her thoughts danced between exhilaration and uncertainty, as if the energies of her recent confrontation were spinning around her, demanding an outlet. With no rehearsal script yet, only ideas swirling like an artist's palette, it felt as if the potential energy could explode into something groundbreaking. Settling into her small, cluttered study, Jane began to sketch out her immersive presentation concept: how to blend historical narratives with visceral performances. But doubts began to creep in. Was she really prepared for this? The intensity of collaboration, the emotional honesty it would require. Was she ready to strip herself bare in front of unknown actors and an audience? She pulled out a sheet of paper, jotting down the titles and stressful questions looming in her mind. Had she ever worked with performers before? Would they accept her vision? The blend of academic rigor and artistic expression was both thrilling and intimidating. Yet somewhere amidst the doubts, a flame of determination sparked. This idea was exactly what she needed to evolve, both professionally and personally. Her mentor's words echoed, "Let us see if you can maintain it in your future research." She mustered the clarity in her thoughts and resolved that this was her future, regardless of the obstacles. She wanted to ignite a discussion that reached beyond the ivory tower and resonated with people's hearts. This was bigger than her. It was about the stories begging to be told. With each new bullet point, she began envisioning her narrative thread: a woman in a brothel from 2,000 years ago. A tale too often overlooked and shrouded in stigma, yet ripe with rich history and human experience. How she had persevered, maneuvering through societal constraints to assert her own identity. Jane felt a wave of empathy, realizing that these narratives were lived experiences woven with resilience. Exhilaration coursed through her as she imagined ways to depict scenes through movement and powerful speeches, creating moments where the audience could almost taste the air of ancient Pompeii alongside its inhabitants. But fear lurked at the edge of this positive vision. How would the artistic team take her historical perspective? Would they embrace the authenticity she aimed to convey, or dismiss her commitment to realism in pursuit of entertainment? Closing her eyes, Jane took a moment, inhaling deeply to center herself. Her hands hesitated over the keyboard. The idea of sharing her unpolished ideas with potential collaborators weighed heavily like a stone in her stomach. What if they scoffed at her ambitions, or worse, their input diverted her vision into something she hadn't intended? Determination surged as she put fingers to keys, crafting an outreach email to a local theater group known for producing innovative, boundary-pushing works. If she wanted to forge this new path, she had to confront her fears head-on, step by step, no matter how daunting the journey might appear. After an agonizing period of mentally rehearsing the email's wording, she took the plunge. Clicking send raised a shiver along her spine. Now the waiting began. She felt raw and exposed, her hopes pinned uncomfortably on the reaction of artists she had yet to meet. Every passing minute amplified her anxiety, demanding a response. Would they understand her vision, or would they crumble it with skepticism? While her thoughts swirled, a shout echoed from the street below, and Jane peered out, momentarily distracted. She wondered about the lives of those strangers. Did they have dreams and aspirations similar to her own? The bustling city around her pulsed with energy. Embracing this new reality, Jane contemplated what her life would look like pursuing a different path. The transformational potential wasn't just in her project, but in rediscovering her own voice and fortitude through the collaborative process. As she paced the room, the tension within her began to ripple. The phone buzzed unexpectedly on her desk, and her heart leaped. A message. Could this be an invitation into the artistic realm she envisioned, or perhaps a door closing on her aspirations? With bated breath and an erratic pulse, she reached for her phone, ready to confront the possibility the future held. The message flashed on her screen, a beacon of light amid her swirling doubts. It was from the theater group, a reply. Jane's heart raced as she felt an electric jolt of hope mixed with trepidation. The opener was gracious, but the real impact lay in the words that followed. They were interested, but as her eyes scanned the email, a chill washed over her. They wanted to meet in person to discuss her vision. A face-to-face meeting meant vulnerability. She'd have to articulate her ideas in real time, in front of people who might judge her passion. The reality of her dream began to feel daunting once again. What if she faltered under scrutiny? For days, Jane rehearsed what she would say. She crafted narratives in her mind, each more audacious than the last, attempting to visualize her ancient woman coming alive on stage. She even drafted potential dialogue, letting the words flow in and out like the Mediterranean breeze she imagined wafting through Pompeii's streets. The scene played out in her head, a sun-drenched room filled with actors, her whisper carried on their voices, every motion gracefully echoing the resilience of their shared history. Moments prior to the meeting, she stood in front of the mirror, questioning her outfit. Fittingly artistic, yet grounded enough to reflect her professional gravitas. She settled on a conservative dress with a vibrant scarf, a perfect blend of authority and creativity. However, as each moment ticked closer to her appointment, she felt the weight of her resolve wane. What if they didn't see her vision? What if the authenticity she cherished fell flat? Arriving at the theater, Jane was enveloped by the atmosphere. High ceilings adorned with theatrical art, the faint scent of paint, and an underlying promise of stories yet untold. She found herself standing before a table occupied by three figures, each with an air of creativity resonating from their style. They seemed expectant, eager, and maybe a little skeptical. As they exchanged pleasantries, Jane could sense the tension lurking just beneath the surface of her composure. But with every question they posed, she leaned into the challenge. She narrated the life of her protagonist, weaving historical context into her performance ideas, allowing the audience to enter her fragile world through a drive of emotional authenticity. As she spoke, the nerves transformed into passion, surging with a vibrancy that she hoped would resonate with them. But there was an unexpected question, posed with a pointed tilt of the head. How do you plan to address the complexities of her life in a contemporary light? How will you balance authenticity with the need for entertainment? The question struck like an arrow, targeting her hidden fears. The joker in the corner of her mind whispered that perhaps she was naive. The world didn't respond kindly to such audacious spiritual risks. Here, she faced a moral dilemma, a crossroads between adherence to her integrity and the pressure to compromise. Drawing a deep breath, Jane decided to confront and embrace the question. She leaned forward, her voice steady. The beauty of these stories lies in their universality, and I believe it's essential for us to unearth the depth amidst entertainment. It's about finding that connective tissue that allows modern audiences to empathize while remaining true to the histories we wish to explore. There was a pause, their faces shifting as they absorbed her conviction. A glimmer of intrigue ignited in the atmosphere, propelling her confidence higher. The discussion wandered into fertile ground, a dialogue rather than a pitch. Ideas flowed like unchecked artistry, a spontaneous creation born in real time. As the meeting drew to a close, Jane felt lighter, her spirit untethered. They had shown genuine interest to collaborate and expand further, but she was mindful not to overreach. Practical steps remained, and doubt threatened to creep back in. Walking down the theater steps, her mind buzzed with possibilities. She had confronted her fears, yet questions loomed on how to execute these ideas authentically. What if they demanded more modifications? Would her vision withstand the weight of their expectations? Jane paused at the street corner, processing her next move. In that moment, clarity struck. She had to define her boundaries, to ensure that the essence of her narrative remained undiluted. Losing that would mean losing herself. As she pulled out her phone to jot down thoughts, a new idea ignited a twist in her narrative. But just as she began to flesh it out, her previous anxieties resurfaced. Would this new approach alienate her collaborators? Jane raced home, compelled to shape this new direction but aware that the time for merely envisioning was over. She had to act decisively. The moment was coming to redefine not just her project but what she stood for, battling a tension that could either liberate her voice or outright silence it. With a firm resolve, she knew the next step would be the defining test. Would she embrace the risks to craft something bold, or would she caution herself back into the shadows? The road ahead glimmered with uncertainty, yet possibilities sparkled like stars. That night, while the city pulsed with life outside her window, Jane prepared to dive deeper into her craft, bracing for the confrontation her creativity demanded. The true moment of revelation was approaching, not just for her work, but for who she'd become in the process. The days flowed like the currents of the Tiber as Jane embraced her journey, inching closer to a metamorphosis. She immersed herself in research, entwining details of her protagonist's life with contemporary issues, allowing the ancient narratives to breathe anew. Each late-night session fueled her with creativity, elevating her spirits against the backdrop of earlier doubts. The theater group had welcomed her ideas, and she now realized that this was an opportunity not only to share her work but to redefine her path. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by books, sketches, and notes, an exciting revelation dawned on her. Her historical character would not simply be a figure from the past, but a beacon of resilience mirroring modern struggles, connecting generations through the thread of shared experience. This approach would resonate with audiences, allowing them to grapple with the complexities of womanhood across time. Eagerly, she compiled her thoughts, converting them into a cohesive outline for the presentation. The format was no longer just a performance. It morphed into an experience, one that staged the travails, triumphs, and everyday realities of women throughout history, allowing the audience to taste the grit and grace imbued in their legacies. This wasn't just about her academic pursuits. It was her calling to amplify voices that deserved reverberation and embrace the emotional depth inherent in these stories. Days flitted by as rehearsals began. Collaboration with the theater group blossomed into a dynamic synthesis of energy and vision. Jane felt invigorated by their passion, the actors embodying the characters she had imbued with life, bringing forth palpable emotion that transcended mere performance. Each practice unveiled a layer of vulnerability she had buried deep within herself. As she directed them, she realized she was not only guiding the actors, but also reclaiming the narratives that echoed her own struggles. But with the mounting excitement came the unavoidable critique, the fear of rejection from an audience unfamiliar with her artistic approach. She always reminded herself of the importance of these stories, of transforming echoes of silence into powerful voices. The possibilities became a weight that both lifted her and pressed down with doubt. What if the performance didn't resonate? Would the audience connect with her vision or dismiss it as another art piece? The day of the performance arrived, and the room buzzed with an electric undercurrent. Jane stood backstage, her heart racing. The hum of anticipation rattled through her as she watched the theater fill with faces, some eager, some unsure. In that moment, she felt an almost palpable connection to the women whose stories she was about to share, those who had waited centuries for someone to illuminate their forgotten lives. As the lights dimmed and the first scene unfolded, Jane breathed deeply, allowing herself to sit within the moment. The actors came alive in front of her, creating an atmospheric tapestry that rippled with emotion. Jane had constructed a world where the past and present intertwined seamlessly. The audience witnessed the struggles of her protagonist and felt the echoes of her pain resonate deeply. Each scene captured hearts and launched minds into reflection, hearts swelling with empathy, minds ablaze with understanding. And as they performed, Jane felt her own metamorphosis mirrored in the faces of the audience. She could see them leaning forward, rapt with attention, hanging on every word that fell from the stage. It became about more than just her project. It was about a shared reckoning with history and identity. The applause that erupted at the conclusion wasn't merely for a theatrical performance. It was a long-awaited recognition of the narratives that had simmered, waiting patiently for their moment to rise. Walking onto the stage after the final curtain call, Jane was met not just by applause, but by grateful eyes glistening with acknowledgement. She had bridged a chasm of silence and doubt. In their warm embrace, she experienced profound validation. She was no longer an outlier in the academic world, but an integral part of a necessary discourse. Joy rushed through her, mingling with tears she hadn't expected. As she took center stage, the support of the theater group around her felt like a testament to the strength of collaboration. A small voice inside her whispered a recognition of her growth. She had transformed from a woman hiding in the shadows of doubt into a brave curator of stories, who had forged her own path, fueled not just by her ambition, but by the histories interwoven through countless women. Jane stepped forward, palms raised in gratitude, speaking to the audience. This is just the beginning. Together we can turn the whispers of time into an ongoing dialogue. We owe it to the stories that remain untold. Her proclamation united the theater with an unbreakable bond, and her voice resonated throughout the halls, signaling the climax of a transformation that had begun long before this journey unfolded. In this moment of realization, Jane grasped that her fear had not only driven her, but had also led to her empowerment. She emerged empowered, confident, and resolute, not just as an archaeologist but as a voice for those lost in the annals of time. What had once seemed a daunting hill was now a summit she had conquered, revealing her established place within the academic universe. Next, she envisioned submitting her project to a national conference, where women's narratives could engage scholars and broader audiences alike. Overwhelmed with the prospect of new achievements, Jane felt transformed not just through the lens of her professional growth, but through her profound journey of self-acceptance. As she took her final bow, her heart swelled with the knowledge that the stories she discovered would never fade back into silence again. Jane had achieved not just a personal triumph, but but had carved out a space for herself and countless others, merging the bridge between past and present. The future sparkled bright before her, electric with potential, inviting her to leap further into a world where she would continue to illuminate the luminous tapestry that is women's history. And so, as she stepped into the wings of her career, Jane understood the importance of honoring the legacy she was now part of, armed with the knowledge that true success is defined not by others, but by the heart guiding one's journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support great narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this profound journey and transformation. Don't wait even one more second to show your support and be part of a community that celebrates resilience through personal overcoming stories.